All right, so we're here with someone who probably doesn't need an introduction for a lot of you, but in any case, I'm gonna have him introduce himself. What's your name?
What's up, guys? Well, my social handle goes by David Khai. So David's my English name and Khai is my Vietnamese name, so I just put them sort of together.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Cool. And where are you from?
Well, born in Melbourne, Australia. You can tell by the Aussie accent, maybe. But background is Vietnamese. Mum and dad were born here and lineage is sort of here. Yeah.
Cool. And how old are you?
Right now I'm 27. Yeah. Getting up there.
Yeah, definitely. Getting old. What do you do for a living?
What do I do for a living? Probably one of the best jobs in the world. Traveling and making money off YouTube is my primary source of income. But to say, like, I've been working for over a decade back in Australia prior in order to have a bit of a piggy bank in order to help fund my travels. But yeah, mainly making money off AdSense on YouTube.
That's awesome. What is your YouTube channel about?
YouTube channel is about, it's raw travel niche. So when I first started, I was watching people like Harry Jagger, Luke Demant, and then dabbled into like Kurt Kaz. So raw niche, maybe even big time Bentley back there. A little bit of that raw travel niche, food, experiencing different cultures. Yeah, anything travel related really.
So do you live here in Vietnam, or how often do you come here? Where you living?
It's a tough one because, well, in the last year and a half that I've been traveling in YouTube, I've been to 15 different countries, but Vietnam's sort of like my base. It's a great place in Southeast Asia to go to different countries, so I wouldn't say I live here, but like I spend the majority of my time here.
How does being of Vietnamese heritage affect your experience here in Vietnam?
It's a little bit hit and miss. I think one reason, so even though I grew up in Australia, I spoke a lot of Vietnamese, or I learned Vietnamese from my parents growing up, so my Vietnamese is decent. I can have conversations, I can order, I can do everything like your basic living needs here, so that's all covered, so that's great in that aspect. The fact that I can speak to people and communicate, but sometimes, I don't know if it's a certain type of Vietnamese here or a different generation. Being a Viet-Kieu, it's not sometimes as easy. I don't know if it's whether the people I'm speaking to are coming from the fact that I might be a little bit more privileged being Vietnamese, but being born overseas, they might see it that way. I definitely find if I speak English in certain scenarios, that helps a lot more. People are a lot more warm. I don't know what that is all about, but yeah, it's hit and miss. Sometimes having being Vietnamese is great, and sometimes it's not as beneficial, but yeah, sure, it is what it is.
So yeah, my next question was, do you think Viet-Kieu people are treated any differently than local Vietnamese people here?
It really depends. Like, my answer is always going to say it depends on the context, depends on the person. Like, I've got Viet-Kieu mates here, and sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. Yeah, it's hit and miss.
Do you think they're treated differently than other foreigners here?
They're potentially, like, there's definitely a, what's the word I'm looking for? White privilege is a terrible word to use to describe it, but sometimes, like, even going out with Bentley, and when he speaks Vietnamese, like, people are a lot more warm and like very curious, probably because they don't see a lot of people like Bentley, Americans, whatever, speak Vietnamese, so that catches your eye a little bit. But maybe it's a touristy thing as well, like maybe they know you got money, they're a bit nicer.
Sure, maybe,
yeah. I don't know, but yeah, that's my guess.
Is there any sense of culture shock that you experienced coming from Australia to Vietnam?
I think if I was coming here for my first time, 100%. Yeah. Australia is probably very similar to like major cities in the US, even like the UK. It's a lot nicer, it's a lot more furnished, everything's a lot more modern, but I've been coming here since I was a kid. Like, I've got grandparents and uncles and aunties here, so I've been here so many times. It's normal. Yeah, it almost feels like home.
When was the first time you came here? How old were you?
Oh man, I was super young. I would have been like 5 or 6, maybe even younger.
It's like formative memories here in your childhood.
Yeah, I probably don't really remember those young age, but I had photos, so it sort of like jogs a little bit of memory, but maybe when I was 10 or 12, I remember it a lot more.
So you kind of touched on this in your last answer, but do you feel like you have two hometowns or two home countries?
Yeah, for sure. Melbourne's always home, but Vietnam, I think it's like a tribal thing. Like in Australia, even though it's a lot more multicultural, it might be too multicultural in a way to feel like completely at home. Whereas being in Vietnam, you know, you're surrounded a lot more by people that look similar, people that speak, you know, the same language that you grew up on. So definitely two homes. Yeah.
Which aspect of each place feels more like home to you? Like, for example, do you feel more at home eating Australian food or Vietnamese food, or listening to Western music or Vietnamese music?
Yeah. On the food front, like, I don't really eat Australian food, quote unquote. I don't think there's really Australian food. If you ever come to Australia, especially Melbourne, like, there's so many different races. Like Indian food's great, Greek food, Italian food, Vietnamese food. So I feel a lot more at home in Australia just because Mum's there. Mum does the cooking whenever I visit or wherever I'm staying there. So that always feels like home.
Yeah.
But it's funny because Mum cooks Southern Vietnamese food. So when I come here, some dishes that I eat just taste like Mum's home cooking. So food-wise, it's sort of like both feel like home. But music, I don't listen to Vietnamese music. Like,
yeah,
I don't understand it for one. Like, when you listen to music from a country, it's a lot more hard. It's a lot quicker pace, so I struggle with that. So I'm definitely into like more English-speaking music.
Does your mom always cook Vietnamese food, or does she also try to cook some Western food?
When we were younger, like, she might mix it up with a steak here and there, some salmon, but predominantly it's Vietnamese food. But if we don't feel like Vietnamese food, I might cook, or we might get some takeout. Yeah, I think that's the beauty about being in Australia. You get great home cooking, great Vietnamese food, and then great Western food as well.
What's your favorite meal that your mom cooks?
Favorite meal that Mum cooks, might be bún bò Huế is really good, or bún riêu is really good, or even pho, like any noodle-based soup, she kills it. Yeah.
What do you think are the main cultural differences between Australia and, I guess you could characterize that as the West and Vietnam?
Yeah. Let's classify it as the West. It's probably a bit easier, but culturally the people are like completely different. I think in Vietnam the people are probably a little bit more straightforward than the West. In the West, like, you might talk around things a little bit, and I think especially with like now, like 2024, especially in the States, like on my social media you get a lot of like that. It's a lot of like negative news that's so readily available. It's quite toxic. But like in the West, what I love about the culture is it's a lot more of a comfortable life. Like, I think it's easier to build a life and family over there. Like, if you can get a decent paying job. I don't know about the States, but Tyler's saying that LA is like hard to live in, etc.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's expensive. Melbourne's a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
But property prices are a lot more. But what I love about the culture in Vietnam is the fact that it's a lot more family oriented.
Yeah.
Like, you'll see people out in the morning going to the park, going for jogs, exercising with their kids. And if you're living in like Nha Trang, Da Nang, like everyone goes out in the evening to chill by the beach. It's a lot more like a family vibe, whereas I think in the West everyone stays in their home a lot more. Yeah, that's probably the major ones.
What are your top 3 favorite things about Vietnam?
Okay. Food, that's got to be number one. Like, the affordability, but the fact that the food's also quality. That the food's favorite auntie over there.
Yeah.
But the food's quality, and yeah, it's a great price. You know, like, I think gom tam, which is one of my favorite Vietnamese dish, you can get it for like $3-4 Australian dollars, whereas in Australia you're looking at like 4 to 5 times the price. What else do I love about Vietnam?
Can you find good cơm tam in Australia?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's in Melbourne and Sydney, there's a large Vietnamese population.
Okay.
So when people were fleeing Vietnam post the war, a lot of them went to like Cabramatta in Sydney or Melbourne, And in the area I live, it's very Vietnamese oriented.
Okay.
Second thing that I love, hey, I'm gonna say the people. Majority of the people, it's easy to make friends, and the life's a little bit more of a slower pace compared to where I'm from in Melbourne, where it's a little bit harder to make friends. It's a little bit more standoffish if you go out at night. People might not be as willing to have a conversation, unless you're like a couple beers deep. Then you know that's a little bit different. But yeah, I think I like the people here. It's easy to have a chat, and for me the weather, like
Really?
I prefer the heat over the cold. And right now, like Melbourne's cold probably 6 months, if not longer, out of the year.
How cold?
Right now it's like deep in winter, so like mornings like 2 degrees Celsius.
Oh, that's cold.
It's frosty.
Yeah.
It's frosty. Whereas like the coldest you're gonna get here in Saigon might be 30.
Yeah.
And that's still pretty
true.
like maybe like 20 during the morning, but
I didn't realize that Australia got that cold. That's crazy.
Melbourne specifically.
Ah.
Yeah.
Where is that geographically in terms of?
So like Australia is like that, and then Melbourne's like down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like southeast.
Yeah, like to way down the bottom towards southeast.
Okay. What are your 3 least favorite things about Vietnam?
I think even though the people are great, maybe in the city more so, but there's definitely a hustle culture. So if you're not from here and you're not like in the know-how with money, in the know-how with like talking about certain things related to money, like a lot of people can sniff that out and might try and take advantage of you. That's definitely true in the West as well, but like I feel like it's a lot more of a grind to make money here. So people knowing that you're not technically from here, or even if you're Viet-Kieu or like a tourist or Westerner, they might up the prices, they might play around with you a little bit. So that's
A little bit
definitely
less
one
transparency on that.
Yeah, you're gonna have to like bargain for a little bit of things.
Sure.
I'm asking for it, but definitely the pollution. Like in comparison to like Australia, obviously, or even the US, it's a lot more bikes, it's a lot more just activity going on here.
Yeah.
Pollution's not great, but you know, not the end of the world. Third thing, what? I honestly think there's only 2 things I don't like, and that's it.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people say the traffic. How do you feel about the traffic in Saigon?
Traffic.
I guess that wouldn't be Vietnam though. That would just be
That's
Saigon.
like just Saigon,
Or Hanoi.
Like I've been doing a little bike trip in Vietnam, and once I was out of Saigon, roads were relatively peaceful. Besides highways, you might get some trucks.
Yeah.
Like everywhere else is a lot more chill than here,
Do you feel comfortable on a motorbike here?
Definitely now.
Yeah.
Like after this bike trip, I don't know when this is gonna come out, but like I've been doing a bike trip, I haven't finished it yet.
Yeah.
But a lot more comfortable. Once you get behind the wheel, it's a lot easier,
How long do you think it took you to get comfortable behind the wheel of a motorbike here?
Thankfully, I was driving in other countries like Thailand and stuff, so they gave me a good experience, but maybe like a week, 2 at most,
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward.
It's pretty
with
straightforward.
an automatic.
Yeah. I prefer a semi-automatic though.
Do you? Yeah.
It's super, even easier.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I started on a semi-automatic. A Honda Wave was my first one.
Yep.
And then that is semi-auto, right? Doesn't have a clutch, but you still change gears.
You change gears with the your feet.
Right.
Yep.
But there's no.
Yeah. So essentially, for anyone watching semi-auto, in auto you have a brake on your left for the rear and a brake on the right for the front.
Yeah.
Whereas what happens is the fact that you're squeezing it so much, it gets sore. So with the semi-auto, they remove the left-hand rear brake and it just on your feet instead. So it's like a clutch with a manual car.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. I never thought of. You're right though. I think braking with your foot.
In the city, it might be okay using the auto. But when you go on for like 3-4 hour bike trips, your hand will get sore on an auto.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I've really only done a 3 or 4 hour bike trip one time. I was going out to Motorbike, basically the border of Cambodia. I've always been a little bit afraid to do those longer bike trips. I don't know. I just have a little bit of fear for my safety on the open road. Is it a safe thing to do, like those long bike trips? How do you feel about it?
You definitely have to be somewhat experienced as a driver. I wouldn't be like, if you've never driven before, you know, just go gung-ho. You're probably gonna die. or at least get
yeah,
into
yeah.
an accident. I'm being straight up.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're looking both ways 24/7.
Right.
But yeah, I found once I was out of the city, it was calm, just straight roads. Like the worst you're gonna get is if it rains or if you're close to a truck. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe not something you do right off the bat, but once you get kind of comfortable.
The amount of tourists I've seen with like gashes on their legs.
Yeah.
I've seen a guy with like his whole neck and his whole arms were like in a cast because he got into an accident. I'm like,
have you ever had like a major medical emergency or situation here in Vietnam?
no,
No.
nothing ever major.
How does Vietnam compare to other countries you've been to in Southeast Asia?
Well, straight off, my answer's already biased because I grew up with Vietnamese culture, so I feel like at home here. That's why I find myself coming back here. But you said culturally wise, yeah, you said, or like
Just
country wise?
how does it compare in general?
Yeah, in general, depends what country I'm comparing it to. I like a country like Japan that I've been to. Japan is like the top echelon of like travel destinations because everything is modern. You know, even though there's not as much English, everything is like made for convenience in Japan. Whereas Vietnam, it's a little bit trickier to navigate things.
Sure.
A little bit. Vietnam's like middle tier, if not a little bit higher in terms of travel destinations. Somewhere like India, where I've been, or Nepal in South Asia, it's a lot more. It's not as advanced, so it's a lot harder to get around.
Yeah.
And whatnot. Yeah. So like Vietnam's a great destination for first-time tourists, I'd say. Like, yeah, you can get everything.
I think a lot of people, when they're thinking about booking a trip to like Southeast Asia, they think, should I go to Vietnam or should I go to Thailand or should I go to the
100%.
Philippines? How would you compare like Vietnam to Thailand specifically?
Yeah, I think they're both completely different countries. Thailand's a lot more. If I was to break it down, if I want to go and have the best time party-wise, and I'm going with a bunch of boys or with mates, Thailand's like the perfect spot. I can go to Phuket, I can go to like so many of the islands. Like the islands are better than any islands you're going to get here in Vietnam. The party life is incredible. You can get basically anything you want. Not that I'm, encouraging that, but it's a party country. And then you do get Bangkok, which Bangkok's a little bit like Saigon. It's a bit more of a city vibe. Food's good as well. But if I wanted like I don't know, once again I'm biased, but if I wanted a proper like travel destination spot, Vietnam's probably on the top of my agenda. Because like going to the north and then going to like the Ha Giang Loop, going through Sapa, it's a lot more like touristy things to do.
Yeah.
This is just in my personal opinion, but Thailand's like party, beach, it's got it all.
What are your plans for the future, and do you want to settle down in Vietnam someday maybe?
Oh, I'm at a little bit of a crossroads right now. In terms of the content that I want to produce, that's in the back of my head. At least for the end of this year, I want to hit up a couple other countries.
Where are you thinking?
I'm thinking China. That's like a super interesting country. Maybe South Korea. If not, I want to head back to the Philippines. I've got like some unfinished business there. I really love the Philippines.
I do too.
So this year is definitely a lot more of the raw travel niche.
Yeah.
Next year, I've got to do some more planning.
Yeah.
But in terms of settling down, an option is next year, maybe settling down here for 6 months or a year and making Vietnam my base and making pure Vietnam content. So that's a possibility as well. But yeah, I'm unsure at the moment.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time to do this interview with me. I really enjoyed it, and I hope the viewers enjoyed it as well. You guys should definitely all go check out David Khai's channel. It's great content. If you like Vietnam content, if you love this channel already, you're definitely going to love his channel, because I think there's a lot of parallels and he does a really great job with his videos. So thank you so much for spending the time with me. And
I appreciate it, man. No, it's fun doing this, and yeah, hope you guys enjoy it.